All right, I know there's still a few more people trickling in, but I wanted to take a moment to welcome everybody. Those of you that don't know, I am Matt Haberock. I am the immediate past chair of the Hastings Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm excited to have everybody here. It's great to see a room full of people. I used to work in the political sector, so it's fun to see people engaged in the process and excited about the bills, because generally politicians and legislation aren't always the things that are the most exciting of topics to get engaged in, but this is great to have everybody here. So just a quick update. So these events are hosted every year to give Senator Halloran an opportunity to come back to Hastings and keep us updated on what's going on in Lincoln. The Hastings Area Chamber of Commerce and the Adams and Webster County Farm Bureau are excited to host these as an opportunity for you as constituents to have hear the senator. So I do want to say we're excited for the conversation today and what will come. Obviously, these aren't necessarily a ringing endorsement of the Chamber or Adams and Webster County Farm Bureau, but a great opportunity for the senator to talk about his priorities, as well as you all to talk about your priorities and what you would like to see him working on our behalf in Lincoln. So, as you've probably heard, there's been over 800 bills introduced. So there's just a few topics for the senator to discuss. Also want to welcome and thank Senator Erdman making his way out. Senator Erdman represents the Panhandle of Nebraska and comes from a long line of legislative leaders. I actually have had a chance to work with his son a lot on legislation, and in my previous life had a chance to work with Senator Erdman as well. So great leadership from the Panhandle here today too. For those of you that do participate in the process, I'm sure that you have also heard that it's kind of a unique process, and the senator can speak more on this, but they're going to all-day committee hearings starting on Monday. So as you're watching the process, maybe participating through legislation, through testimony, keep that in mind as probably around 9:30, 10 o'clock committee hearings will get started this week. And with that also means congratulations and thank you to Senator Halloran for chairing our Agriculture Committee. That is a huge part of our economy here in Adams County, so appreciate your leadership there. So I guess one other introduction I wanted to make, normally Lance Atwater is here to represent Adams and Webster County Farm Bureau. We've got the Young Farmers and Ranchers Conference going on in Kearney, so he is unable to attend, but we do have Bruce Reeker in the room somewhere. Bruce is one of the lobbyists working on behalf of farmers and ranchers and the Farm Bureau members in Lincoln, Nebraska. So thank you, Bruce, for coming out this morning as well. So with that, we'll give the senator a few moments to make some remarks, and then we'll open it up. I do have a few question cards already. If you want to jot down a question, you can wave your hand, raise the card in the air, and I'll come grab it and make sure that we get those questions directed to the senator. So thank you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody.
Morning. Morning.
So, I haven't been back for a couple of weeks. I heard rumors that you had some snow. And the rumors were confirmed when we got home. It's good to see you all here. It's always a pleasure to see constituents from District 33 and to have a chance to talk to you one-on-one and give you a little information about what's going on in the Capitol. That was a very good introduction. I appreciate that. It gave you some background about what is happening there. As he pointed out, we have 800 plus bills that have been dropped, and they are just starting to go through the committee process now. So what that means is until they go through the committees, respective committees that they're referenced to, the bills are referenced to, until they make it through the committees, they don't come to the floor, right? So we really don't have any bills that are pending on the floor for a couple of weeks. As he pointed out, the next 2 weeks, we're going to have all-day committee hearings, and Business and Labor is my committee hearing on Monday, and this is my homework that I was given by my LA, Rod Crow. Rod, raise your hand over here somewhere, he's in the back. Rod is my LA, so if you call my office, you'll be talking to him if you can get a hold of me. This is just an example. There's 13 bills here in Business and Labor on Monday, all-day committee hearing. I have not read these yet. I will by Monday. But it just reemphasizes my point that there are 800 bills. I can't take the time with you right now, and it would be particularly a waste of time to talk to you about a lot of those bills because they're not out of committee yet. Now, that doesn't mean if you have an issue you want to talk to us about, let's have that interaction. I have kind of pirated this particular town hall meeting with one subject. We'll spend about an hour on that. In the last half hour, we will open it up for discussion on any other issue that you want to talk about. But that one issue that I want to bring to your attention is a innovative tax reform proposal that has been brought over the last several years by Senator Steve Erdman from District 47. I'll introduce him here shortly and let him explain it to you. But it's a tax reform proposal. We call it the EPIC option. EPIC stands for Eliminate Property, Income, and Corporate Taxes. It's not an additional tax. It will eliminate those taxes, but it's a revenue-neutral tax that will provide the revenue necessary for both the state and for local units of government. So I'm not going to take the wind out of Steve Erdman's sails because his sails are much bigger than mine on this issue. So with that, I wish you all, and we'll again take about an hour on this and then I'll open it up for other issues. But for now, if you would you give Senator Steve Erdman a warm District 33 welcome.
Thank you, Steve. I thought maybe he would do this. So you can see him. Right? You can only make fun of short people if you're short. So I appreciate being here today. Some of you have traveled a long way, and I appreciate that. I told these gentlemen here, I said, would it be appropriate if I addressed this crowd to say, it's good to see some new faces here and some old faces with new teeth. I did that at the old timers picnic in Hemingford last summer. Told my wife I was going to do that. She said, oh, no. So I did that, and everybody laughed, but two guys in the back. And I said, hey, those two guys, they're the ones with the new teeth. But anyway, I appreciate you being here. I want to give just a little background, excuse me, how we got here. When I ran for the legislature, I made a promise. The promise was, I'm going to fix property tax. And I didn't realize how difficult that was going to be. Because I came from the county commissioner board, and we generally made a decision on a Tuesday, and by the next Tuesday following, or a week later, 2 weeks later, it was done. We did whatever we were going to do. That doesn't happen here. So in 17, we did absolutely squat for property tax relief. So I made an announcement in the rotunda. I had a press conference and asked anyone who wanted to help me try to reduce property tax to join me. And I was joined by Farm Bureau, Bruce Ricker, and Farm Bureau, and several others. About 35 people met and talked about starting a petition drive to lower taxes, property tax by 30%. That petition went until May that year, and then for some reason, the people circulating it dropped it. So then the next year, we started a petition to lower property tax by 35%. That was ceased by COVID. So both of those initiatives weren't the answer. It was the opportunity for us to force the discussion about fixing our broken tax system. In the meantime, when that second petition failed, a gentleman by the name of Rob Rohrbaugh stopped in my office and he said, I got an idea. It's a consumption tax. It'll eliminate property tax, personal and real, income tax, corporate and individual, inheritance tax, capital gains tax with the state, and sales tax. And replace it with one flat consumption tax. And I said, hold up, I'm going to invite somebody. So I called Senator Holler and I said, come to my office, I got a new proposal. So we in turn thought we should call the Democrats, because we both happen to be Republicans. So we called Senator Mike McDonald from Omaha. Mike came over, we listened for about 10 minutes, and we said, this is the solution. So from that day until this, we've been working on the EPIC option to eliminate your property tax, your income tax, your inheritance tax, and all other taxes, and we're going to collect one flat consumption tax on things that you consume or services that you hire for your own personal use. And they say, well, how's that going to work? Because we're not going to get the same or enough revenue to support all the taxes we're going to eliminate. So what we did is we hired a firm called Beacon Hill Institute to do an dynamic study for us. And the goal of that study was to prove that we could collect the same amount of revenue from a consumption tax as we could from all these taxes we're eliminating. The first study they did we had included, it's difficult to explain the prebate, what we had. It was called a prebate, which is a rebate in advance. And it was whatever your filing status is, if you're a couple of two, the poverty level for a couple was like 17,000. So you multiply that times the consumption tax rate, and we give you a prebate in advance on a smart card each month, so you could offset any consumption tax you had on things you needed to buy, food and clothing. Impossible to explain. Impossible. And even more difficult to understand. So Senator Holleran a year ago came and said, look, we can't explain this. Why don't we eliminate that? So we have decided to eliminate the prebate. The prebate was equal to $1.9 billion. That's what it was going to cost for us to give that prebate. We eliminated the prebate. We then have now exempted food from having consumption tax collected. So low-income people or people who have to buy food won't have to pay the consumption tax. So has anybody in this room ever heard of Art Laffer? Art Laffer happens to be probably the most renowned economist in the nation. Anybody here Stephen Moore? You ever watch Fox Business News? Stephen Moore's on Fox Business News almost daily when they're talking about the economy and those kind of economic things. Stephen Moore came to our office first. We explained the program to Stephen Moore. And Stephen Moore said, I know the governor, and the governor knows me. So I contacted Governor Ricketts, and I said, Stephen Moore is in town, and he'd like to have an audience. The governor said, you come to Omaha, I'll buy the steaks. So Senator Holleran and McDonald and myself and Stephen Moore met with Governor Ricketts, I suppose a couple hours, maybe longer. We explained to him what we were trying to do. And Stephen Moore said to Governor Ricketts numerous times, if you want to leave a legacy, if you want to make a difference in the people's lives in the state of Nebraska, you need to get behind the consumption tax. And he said, by the way, I have a good friend that needs to hear about this. And he called Art Laffer on his cell phone and put him on speakerphone. And we briefly explained the consumption tax to Art Laffer. Now, Art Laffer was the author of Prop 13 in California in the 70s. You've probably heard of Prop 13, fixed their property tax problem. He was the advisor to Ronald Reagan when Ronald Reagan decided to make the tax cuts that he made. That was Art Laffer's idea. Art Laffer was an economist and an advisor to Donald Trump. Art Laffer came to our office a couple weeks later. We explained the whole program to him. He said, I've never seen another proposal I like better than this one. He got one problem. He said that EPIC, the prebate, is stupid. He said you have a positive with the EPIC consumption tax, and you're trying to put a negative in a positive. So when we eliminated the prebate, Art Laffer was pretty pleased with what we're trying to do. So up until then, until we had the confidence or the opinion of those two gentlemen, it was three guys that had gotten together and thought we had a good idea. Once we heard from people who understand the economic situation that the country is in, we decided we must be on the right track. So we've been proceeding forward from that point to this one with the assumption that we're on the right track and we're going to eliminate those taxes so old people like me, when you get old and you're on a fixed income, you have to make a decision. Am I going to pay my property tax or pay my medication? All right? Or you're a young person, you graduate from college and you say, do I want to start my career in a state that is the second highest tax state in the nation? Or do I want to go somewhere else? You know, it's quite obvious the answer is to that. It's called brain drain. Why do young people leave us? It's because of our tax system. When you add all the taxes we collect, all of them, inheritance tax, taxes on your vehicle. By the way, some of you probably licensed your vehicle this year already. And you got that vehicle tax. My wife's car is a 2018. I got the notice last week, $600 vehicle tax. $600. So add all the taxes together, only Illinois is higher than us. And Illinois is losing people quickly. So it took us all this time from the time the state was was founded back in 1867 to get to 1.9 million people. And we talk about how we've grown the population in the recent few years. Most of that is because we got refugees that they brought here. It wasn't people chose to move here to pay our taxes. So this eliminates all those taxes that we now currently pay. So to boil it down and make it very simple, here's how it works. The government goes shopping. By the government, it's all the local units of government. It's the city, the county, the NRD, the school, all those entities that collect taxes. They go shopping. They buy whatever they want to buy. And then they send you the bill. They never send you a little 3x5 note card that says, we're going to raise taxes, can you afford to pay that? So their focus has always been on those who collect and spend the tax dollars. The consumption tax proposal puts you in first place, the taxpayer. You go shopping, you buy something that you consume, you give that money to the government, and the government spends the money you want to pay, not what they want you to pay. Now I know this is a scary situation because we're going to eliminate all these taxes, and by the way, the sky is going to fall, the roads are going to close, we're going to have no schools, the cities are going to go away. All this is going to happen when we do this. You know, that's the same argument they had in 1966. In 1966, the state had one form of revenue. It was called state property tax. The legislature had decided that the state property tax was too high, so they were going to put in place two other taxes to lower state property tax. Imagine that. And so they decided they were going to put a sales tax and an income tax in place to lower property tax. Great idea, right? Well, one thing happened, the voters found out about it, and they circulated a petition in their home, and it eliminated property tax for the state altogether. So now we just have local property tax, we don't have state property tax. And it passed. So when the legislature convened in '67, they had no revenue source, none. So the same argument in '66, because I talked to people who circulated the petition back then, the same argument. Oh man, we can't do this. The government's going to fail and we're going to close the schools. All of that was the same argument they're using today. And I understand change can be difficult to understand and accept. But Ronald Reagan once said, the only way to manage change is to create it. So what we're asking to do is nothing foreign to what we've done in the past. We've done this. When we finally got to the place that said property tax is too much, then we made a decision. And so when I got there, my promise was to do property tax relief, but as I began to understand, the other taxes that we collect are just as regressive as property tax. And that's income tax. Income tax tax you when you're successful. The more you make, the more you pay. It's your money. You ought to be able to keep your money. And that's what this does. So it puts you in first place. It takes the consideration of how much money you have and how much you can pay. And I've heard all the arguments from the counties, from everybody. Oh man, what if we have a recession? Then what happens? How do we get our money? I said, well, let me ask you a different question. So we have a recession and I have to pay my property tax and I don't have the money. You don't care about me? If you don't care about me, it's only about you getting enough money to continue to do what you do. What about you making cuts? What about you making priorities and what you spend your money on, just like I do when my income goes down? So the focus needs to change from what we do now to the property taxpayer. So let me run through just briefly how this is going to work. We're going to have an opportunity. We've started a petition drive. We've tried several times to get this through the legislature, to get it to the ballot. We were unable to do that, so we have changed courses. We have a petition drive started, and the petition drive, there are two of them. One of them eliminates all the taxes except excise tax, and the other one exempts food from being taxed. And we have two petitions, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. We have those here for you to sign today, and for to be able to explain those to you what we're trying to do. I introduced a bill this session in January 5th, and you might want to jot this down. It's LB 79. And LB 79 is what we're calling the nuts and bolts bill. It's the bill that we've introduced that describes how the money is going to be collected and how it's going to be distributed back to to the local units of government, because it's our goal, and the Beacon Hill study shows that we'll have the same amount of revenue just from a different source. And so LD 79 explains that, because we have never had this before. We spent most of the summer working on this. There's probably 15, 18, 20 of us. We've been working on it. We finished, I think it was our 65th Zoom call Sunday. We've had 65 Zoom calls working on this. We're dedicated to getting this done. It's very much like last summer I went fishing and I went in and bought some night crawlers. Anybody fish? Anyway, there was a sign there above where the night crawlers were, and it said, "These worms are guaranteed to catch fish or die trying." And I thought, hey, that's me. That's right. I made a promise to fix the property tax problem or die trying. That's how I'm committed to this. I have never done anything in my life that has taken more of my time, has taken more of my thought process than the Epic consumption tax. Because I made a promise that I was going to do everything I could to fix our broken tax system. Our system is broken. So first of all, you must agree, you must get to the place and understand that the system is broken. And what we have done with the property tax credit fund, what we have done with you being able to get money back from paying your taxes for the taxes you paid on your property, is we've placed a Band-Aid on an amputation. Now, the past governor used to say, "I have given $1 billion in property tax relief since I became governor." True statement. True statement. What he didn't tell you is that property tax went up $1.6 billion. Okay? So what would you call that? Property tax relief? I would call it a decrease in the increase. We have a $330 million property tax credit fund. And I vote for that. It's basically worthless, but I vote for it because it's the only thing we got. So what happens? We send $330 million for local units of government. They take that $330 million, they spend that, and they continue to tax you as if they never got it at all. If that $330 million had a caveat that said, when you get this money, you have to lower your tax asking by the same amount we did, it would mean something. So we keep putting this Band-Aid on this amputation. There's a description about doing the same things you've done year after year and expect different results. That's what we do. And so until people get to the place that they understand this system cannot be fixed, that it is broken, we will never change. And so the opportunity here today is for you to understand what we're trying to do. We want to try to answer your questions. We want to respect your time. We told you this would last until 10:30, and that's when it's going to end. And then we'll stick around as long as it takes to answer questions. But the people that are doing the petition drive, I want to talk about those people just for a moment. The Convention of States people have helped us in a way that is overwhelming to me, because they have organized people to help us to help get the petition signed and circulate those. They're well organized. And you know, if you've been at something a long time, your energy begins to wane just a little, right? Been at this 3 years. And so when a new group steps up and says, hey, that's a great idea, let us help you, it lifts your attitude, right? It's been a great blessing to have those people join us. We are gaining traction in this. Case in point, may not mean something to some of you, may mean something to others. A week ago today, the state Republican Party met in Omaha, and they voted to endorse the consumption tax. We're catching traction. We will continue this until we get this done. But we are making progress. Some of the groups that have talked to us and listened to what we had to say are beginning to change their opinion. And I appreciate that. So I appreciate you coming today. Every one of you had something else you could be doing right now. You came here. That speaks volumes to me, and I appreciate it a lot. Some of you travel a long ways, and I appreciate that. And so let me give you a brief description of what's going to happen when we put the consumption tax in place, because I've had all kinds of questions about what taxes are going to be removed and how does it work. Let's say, for example, you're going to buy a new car. People say, nobody's going to buy a new car because there's going to be a consumption tax on your new car. So the best way to remember what a consumption tax is as compared to a sales tax, and I give that all the time, well, isn't that a sales tax? No, it's not. The difference is this. A consumption tax is collected once by the first purchaser who's consuming something or a service. The sales tax is collected every time something sells. There will be a consumption tax on a new car or pickup used for personal use, no consumption tax on vehicles used for your business, and no consumption tax on used cars. And people say, well, everybody's going to buy a used car. Let's wait a minute, let's talk about that. As I just mentioned, my wife's car is an 18, and the tax on that car is $600. So if you buy a car under the consumption tax proposal, you buy a $50,000 car, the consumption tax rate is going to be less than 7.5%. 7.5% times 50,000 is about $3,600, $3,700 once. Current proposal, current method, you buy a car, you buy a Lincoln, sales tax is 7.5%, same as a consumption tax. And then you pay the personal property tax on the car for 10 years. So at the rate we have it now, at the end of 10 years, if you buy a car under our current proposal, our current tax system, at the end of 10 years, you spend $9,300. $9,300 in sales tax and personal property tax in 10 years. Under the consumption tax, you buy a car, drive it for 10 years. Anybody have an idea how much you spend? $3,700 once. Now, would you rather buy a new car under the consumption tax proposal or under our current system? I think I know the answer to that. That's one example. The other example is, figure out how much you pay in income tax and property tax, and personal property tax, capital gains tax, all the taxes you currently pay. Divide that by 7.23, 7.4, whatever the rate's going to be, it's going to be less than 7.5, to see how much you would have to spend on consumables to pay that much tax. I would offer this. There won't be a person in this room that will exceed 20% of what they currently pay now in taxes. Now, farmers ought to be all over this, because I've talked to farmers that pay $80 to $100 an acre in property tax. They ought to be all over this. There's no way on God's green earth you can buy enough consumables for your personal use to make that much money, to pay that much. So as we move through this, people begin to understand what it means to us. So how does that happen? People say, well, hey, wait a minute. So all of these taxes are going to go away. Who's going to pay that? Who's going to make that up? Well, it's pretty easy. Currently, we collect sales tax on $49 billion. Now, we don't pay sales tax on $61 billion. There are more things exempt from sales tax than we currently pay sales tax on. You can imagine that. So if you broaden the base, $49 billion now, the consumption tax removes all exemptions. As I said earlier, no consumption tax on business inputs. No consumption tax on purchases for your business. So you change the base from 49 to 60, add 61. The Beacon Hill study showed that we would have an economic advantage the first year of $14 billion. You add those together, it's around $120 billion. So you took your base from 49 to 120. That's how it works. That's why you can collect that much money on less than 7.5% because we broadened the base. And all those people that come from foreign countries like Kansas and Iowa and South Dakota, they get to help pay for our government. They get to help us. So the consumption tax is going to be made up by broadening the base, lowering the rate. When Laffer was in my office, he said, if your rate is 9, this is before we had the study done, if your rate is 9%, he said, do not lock the rate in. Do not put that in statute, in the constitutional amendment, so it's the same. Because he said, what will happen? What will happen in Nebraska is what happened in California. In California, they dropped, Prop 13 dropped their property tax from 2.5% to 1%. One day, 2.5%, next day, 1%. Sky's falling, school's gonna close. He said the only people that were against him were the teachers union, the police union, the longshoremen, the Democrats, the Republicans. He said there wasn't an organization in California that wasn't against him, but they forgot about one group. Anybody know what that was? Voters. Passed 2-1. He said 2 years after they changed the rate from 2.5% to 1%, 2 years, they had more revenue at 1% than they did at 2.5%. So he said, if you lock it in at 9, and you go a couple of years, you're going to wish it was 6, because you're going to have more money than you ever thought you needed, and there's no reason for the state to have people's money in an account. It's their money. So he said, make sure that is somehow you can change the rate, because you're going to need to, because the economy is going to explode. No state can compete with 0. We have the Nebraska Advantage Act, we had that. Now we got a new one. It's called, I Can't Imagine How Your Taxes Are Going to Be Now Act. It's actually called the Imagine Act, but I added another one. We have TIF. Anybody know about TIF? You know why we have TIF? One reason, our taxes are too high. So what do those things do? What does TIF do? What does the Nebraska Advantage Act do? It picks winners and losers. It picks winners and losers. By those who get the tax relief and those who don't. This makes an even playing field. So no state will be able to compete with us for an incentive that's 0. We'll be such a popular place to live, such a popular place to start and have a business, we will have to build a wall around the state to keep people out. And Senator Holleran has said numerous times, Colorado will pay for the wall. That's kind of funny, isn't it? But I'll tell you something, it could be true. And here's why. If you are these other states that don't have a consumption tax, and you go there to start a business and they say, what does your state offer for relief on taxes? They said, we're going to give you 15 years, 50% on your taxes. So we'll give you all your taxes back for 15 years, or whatever opportunity they think they can get you to come, they will share with you. And then that business says, well, Nebraska has no tax. How do you compete with that? They don't. And so it's an opportunity for us to move to the front of the line, not the middle of the bottom. Because if you heard Governor Pillen say in his opening remarks on the State of the State on Wednesday, if we do all the things that he's asked us to do, we may get to number 15. We may get to number 15. But what he wants to do, is it sustainable? Does it fix our tax problem? Does it change the way we tax you? No, it doesn't. So this is the opportunity that we have. There are many questions you may have about the consumption tax, but what I'm asking you today is think about the current system we have. And if you're okay with 20 years from now, working under the same system we have, and hoping the government gives you some property tax relief through some kind of credit, stick with what you got. If you're interested in making life better for you, yourself, your grandkids, and those who follow you, then join the EPIC option. Because it is the answer. And we will continue to do this until either we get it passed or I go away. One of the two. And when I made the promise to those people about property tax, I meant it. And I thought about this morning when I was driving out from Lincoln, I thought, you know, this is kind of like calving season. Any of you have cattle? It's kind of like planting season. It's kind of like harvest season. If you're a CPA, it's kind of like tax season. You know what I'm talking about? January until April 15th. The point is this. When I used to have cattle, it was a very, very difficult time. Very much consumed my time. Doing this, and those people who have volunteered to help us do this, it's like we're in calving season all the time. It's like we're in tax season all the time. Seldom is there a day go by I don't think about something about consumption tax. And just this morning as I'm driving out, and I never thought about this, and I don't know why I didn't, we're gonna eliminate capital gains tax. I never thought about that. But your capital gains tax is collected when you pay your income tax. We're eliminating income tax. So we will eliminate your obligation for state capital gains tax. I never thought about that till this morning. And so as we move through this process, we try to answer all your questions, and we've heard probably, I think in the last 3 years, I've heard every question that's could possibly be asked. So we'll be able to answer those. I don't want to take all that time here today, because I want to leave time for Senator Holler to answer your questions about the bills that we're introducing, the things we're doing. But I want to let you know, stick around afterwards. The people from Convention of States, Brenda Bickford over here, and where's Yellowstone? Yellowstone over here with the black hat, Steve Jessen. All right, we're going to have a meeting up here in front for all the Steves that are here. How many Steves are here? Look at that. All right. So anyway, those people will be here to explain the consumption tax. They'll explain the petition drive. They'll explain how you can get involved, how you can volunteer to help us. The main thing you can do is tell both your friends. Both of them. You guys did hit it. But that's...
Give them the website.
Okay. So, but really, tell your friends that you came to the meeting, you're interested in learning more. Here's how you learn more. EpicTax.org. Epic Tax, is that the one we want to use?
No,
EpicOption.org. EpicOption.org. We changed it from Epic Tax because that sounded kind of negative, right? Tax, right? Bruce? Sounds good when you say Epic Option. And that's what it is. It's an option for you to change the way you're taxed. So, can I take a couple of questions and then we move on?
If you've got questions, I do have one in particular, and I will reiterate, I had a chance to talk to your son earlier this week.
Okay.
He did say there's nothing you think about or talk about more than Epic Tax. So, one question we did have so far, and if you got a question you got wrote down, feel free to put it on a card and bring it up. How will the flat tax work for people in agriculture with big expenses on a yearly basis, machinery, fertilizer, seed, etc.?
Okay. And when they say flat tax, I think they meant consumption tax. There will be no consumption tax on any inputs that the agriculturist buys. No consumption tax. No consumption tax on fertilizer. No consumption tax on feed. When you sell your products, you sell your corn or your beans, no consumption tax. Only on those things that you consume. So a farmer goes into town and buys a new car for his wife, there'll be consumption tax. He buys a new pickup for his operation, no consumption tax. So then your next question is going to be, well, everybody's going to claim that they're a farmer or a business to get an exemption from the consumption tax, correct? All right, so the Department of Revenue currently has a situation, if you go in and apply for a sales tax exemption, you have to have a business, you have to have a sales tax number, and you have to be exempted through the Department of Revenue. That'll be the same procedure for the consumption tax. So, does anyone in here think there's any cheating in taxes now? So let me ask you a different question. Let me ask you in a different way. How much cheating do you think there is? 50%? 20%? 90. I asked that question to Art Lappin, and he started laughing. And I said, is there 20% cheating? And he said, I think it's closer to 60. And he said, we spend billions, with a B, billions, figuring out how not to pay taxes. Billions. And I said, so we don't even get close to collecting all the taxes we should? He said, no. And that's why, I was going to say something about Joe, that's why Joe wanted 87,000 more IRS agents. That's crazy. No, there'll be no tax on any inputs for agriculture, no tax on the accountants who buy a new computer for their business, no consumption tax on those things. Only the things you personally consume. Somebody mows your lawn, consumption tax. Get a haircut, be consumption tax. No consumption tax on business inputs.
I've got a few questions here. I'm going to summarize two of these into one. So within the plan, there's the 5 regional districts. How do we make sure that the Lincoln and Omaha districts don't supersede the rural districts? And how those smaller representative areas would be able to fight for their share of the dollars or the funding. And then also with the legislature approving the expenditures for budget. With the decline in the rural populations, how will we guarantee the dollars needed in rural areas won't be spent by Lincoln and Omaha?
Great question. And we've had that question several times. So in the summer, as I said, we worked on the nuts and bolts bill, and that is from the nuts and bolts bill. We've set up into 5 regions. Each one of those regions will have 5 representatives. Those 5 representatives' job is to collect the budgets from those local units of government, school, city, county. They will culminate those, they will review those to see if they met the requirements that are now in statute. They can only raise their budget 2% or 2.5%, and then the majority vote of the board, they can go to 3.5%. So if they violated any of those statutes, then that person will go to that local unit of government and say, you need to adjust your budget to get back in line. Once they've collected those budgets, there's no adjustment made other than making sure they meet the requirements. They will then submit that to the person. Each one of those regions will have a secretary. The secretary will then submit that budget to the state, and the state's obligation or job is to make sure they distribute the money equally. In other words, our goal is to give them the same exact revenue they have now. So we're going to start with a 5-year of their budget, 5-year average of their budget in the schools. And the counties, we're going to give them a 2.5% increase to try to cover any kind of inflation that may have happened. We're going to have several funds set up for growth and for emergencies that they can apply for. We're trying to make this as objective as possible so it's not subjective, so that they can't take, so those people in the east can't take our money. But we need to guarantee that counties like Arthur, Nebraska, like Banner County and my districts have no consumption tax, get the money that they need to run their schools, their county, and what happens in their county. So that's the goal, is trying to figure out how to guarantee they're going to get the money back. Now that's it. I've heard other ideas. One idea was that we distribute the money back based on the valuation in the county. And that would guarantee each county would get the same amount of revenue they do based on their valuation. So what we did in the nuts and bolts bill, it's a starting point. It's a discussion place to start. Because in the past, we have been accused of not having a distribution model. So we have something to start with. And so the goal is to make sure that the counties that are in the rural parts of the state get their money. The other side of that, let me ask this question, is how do you know now, with our current system, that we're going to get all the money we need? The only difference is, and I get this question, you may have gotten it already, we're losing local control, right? Local control. What does that mean? So a school board member said, we're going to lose local control. And I said, well, are we going to tell you which superintendent to hire? No. I said, are we going to tell you what days to be open? No. What classes to teach? No. Oh, I forgot. What it means is we can't tax the hell out of you without your permission. That's what local control means. And so consequently, we're not doing any of that local control. Our goal is to give them, if we give them more money, I told the school superintendent, we got 3 of them been working with us. They like this idea. Why do they like it? Several reasons. One, they'll know what their budget is July 1st. They don't have to wait till the 1st of October to find out what the valuation is. The second reason they really like it, they get a monthly distribution. Right now they get it twice a year. He said the cash flow is difficult, we get it twice a year. If we get a monthly distribution from the county, does that make our life easier or what? So some of the superintendents that have had enough guts to call us and get involved and try to understand it, and most people don't do that. Most organizations don't call us and try to find out, they just make assumptions. So we're going to try to make sure that we have it set up so that everybody gets every dollar that they currently get. Going forward, that's a different story. But this is not a tax cutting bill. We're not intended to cut people's taxes. See, people make the misconception that we're trying to lower taxes. We're just going to get the same amount of revenue from a different source. So I hope that answers it.
That leads in great to the next question. So with no business-to-business tax, the tax will fall on individuals. Won't that hurt the lower and middle income earners? And how do we make that up just on our wage earners?
That's a great question. The answer is pretty simple. Who do you think buys more used stuff? Low-income people or rich people? I think it's low-income people. Don't you? So under our current system, do low-income people pay sales tax on the stuff they buy that's used? They do. Under the consumption tax, they don't pay any sales tax on used items. So tell me, is it an advantage for low-income people or is it a disadvantage? I think it's an advantage. So don't come to me and say this is regressive for low-income people. Because people who are going to buy new cars that can afford it, people that are going to buy new things that can't afford it, are going to buy new things. People that can't buy new things are going to buy used. So we're incentivizing them, we're giving them an advantage by not collecting consumption tax on used items. How's that regressive? I hear that all the time. Oh man, it's going to be bad for my people, Senator Conrad says. Why is that? We have a lot of low-income people. I said, have you read the bill? Have you read the bill? No. I said, okay, maybe you should read it. After you read it, then let me know how you think it's going to be bad for your people. It's going to be better for low-income people. And they say, wow, the rich people pay property tax on those rentals that those low-income people live in. And so they're going to make more money. Well, let me give you an example. I got several rental properties. I used to have a lot in Nebraska. I have very few now. I have most of them in Arizona. Ask me why. It's because a $235,000 house in Arizona, the property tax is $980. In Lincoln, it's $6. So why don't I have a rental in Arizona? That's why. And so consequently, the tenants pay the property tax in the rent. When my rent goes away, when my property tax goes away on my rental property, guess what? I'll lower the rent. I'll have to. Oh, no, you won't do that. You greedy sucker. You'll just keep making more money. No. Because I got some good tenants. And the guy down the road knows I got good tenants. And so if he lowers his rate because his property tax went down and he takes my tenant, what am I going to do? So the first person that lowers their rent because their property tax went down, all of us will have to. Same with selling things. Same thing.
This one is related to medical and dental expenses. Will the consumption tax punish those with health concerns?
With health insurance?
Health concerns.
Health issues. Okay. The consumption tax will have a premium, you will pay a tax on the premium of your health insurance, and any out-of-pocket costs you may have will have consumption tax. The insurance companies, when they pay your bill to the hospital, will not have consumption tax. That's a business-to-business transaction. So people say, wow, I got to pay consumption tax on my health insurance premium. So as I said earlier, think about how much you're going to save. Think about how much you're going to save by eliminating property tax and income tax, and figure out if you can pay a few dollars on your premium or not. So any out-of-pocket costs you'll have to pay consumption tax on. But when it comes to the bill between the hospital and the insurance company, there'll be no consumption tax. That's a business-to-business transaction. So it's an issue that we have thought about, and you'll hear from the insurance companies. They're going to say, well, you got to collect a consumption tax on their premiums, the total premium. That's not exactly true. Because currently now there's a 1% premium tax the insurance companies in Nebraska pay. And by the way, most major insurance companies are domiciled in Nebraska, and you know why? We have the cheapest insurance premium tax in the nation. Cheapest. All right? And so there'll be no consumption tax by those insurance companies because it's an excise tax. And we're not removing excise tax on cigarettes, alcohol, gas tax, the tax on the insurance companies. Those are all excise taxes. We're leaving those in place because it's too complicated to try to remove those. So the exemption on the consumption tax will be only the excise tax.
Child care affordability and availability is difficult in rural communities. Will the consumption tax affect child care services, and what effect will that have?
You know, that might be a new question. That might be a new question. Yeah, but it's a fair question. So, is that a service? Is that a personal service?
That's what we're asking you in the definition of your bill.
Yeah. So that's the first time I've heard that question, but we'll have to review that and see. But in regards to that question, I have to think through that. Is that a service? A personal service? I have to get back to you. You know who wrote that?
I absolutely do.
Okay. Do you have their contact information?
I absolutely do.
We will get an answer from them. Yeah. 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 Like I said, I thought I heard them all, and you never know. You know, there's two things you should never say. One of them is never, okay? And the other one is always. Those two are dangerous, okay? Yeah, those two are dangerous. So I appreciate the question. So, sorry I didn't have an answer. The best thing to do, I found this out a long time ago, the best thing to do when you don't have an answer is say you don't have the answer. Because sometimes you say something and then you go, they know the answer and they go, no, that's not right.
Casino gaming was passed because of the promise of property tax relief. Are they exempt and how would they be affected?
No, they would not be exempt. That's a personal opportunity there. I don't want to get into gaming, talk about gambling. I've seen what gambling does, what the end result is. It's not good. It's not good. Well, that's my personal opinion. But gambling, if people gambled that could afford it. If only the people gambled who had the money to lose and not affect their well-being. That's not what happens. And I've seen it in other states where the social costs far exceed any advantage you may get by gambling. But that's my own personal opinion.
Are there any further questions for Senator Erdman? Yes.
So which states currently have consumption taxes? And then if you had to forecast into the future, 5 to 10 years, there's a lot of positives you're talking about with this. Are there negatives? Because there has to be. This is an all positive. So if you had to predict in the future, what are some potential barriers, roadblocks, issues that could potentially come up?
I didn't know it was going to work out this morning.
Yeah, good. Interesting. So I've not thought about that, but I would say this. I've thought about this a lot. What happens if we keep our current system? I can answer that. Okay? None of them are good. But there'll be issues that come up that we'll have to deal with that I haven't thought of as the question was asked. But we can continue on this road we have, and I know what the ramifications of that is. Our population keeps going down, old people leave, young people leave. So I would like to take a chance that we'll try something different, because it surely can't be worse than what we currently have. But I haven't thought of any negative ramifications. Let me address the comment you asked or the question you had about other states. I asked Laffer about that. I said to Laffer, is there another state, is there another instance where a consumption tax is being implemented? And he said, those states that don't have income tax is the closest example that you can use. And he said, and Stephen Moore was the same way. Stephen Moore and Laffer have been working the last several years to try to eliminate property tax, state income tax, excuse me. And he said, those states that don't have income tax, state income tax, do extremely better than the states that do. And so the example then would be any of those states that don't have an income tax. South Dakota has no income tax, Wyoming, Arizona, or Florida, and some of those states. Florida is one of the fastest growing states in the nation. And people say, well, okay, Florida doesn't have the income tax, but let me tell you something about Florida. All right? My wife and I had 3 houses there because in 2012 we sold our farms. Our boys didn't want a farm, so we sold our farms in 2012. We bought rental properties, 3 of them in Arizona, in Florida, 1 in Arizona, and several in Nebraska. We started in Florida with a house we bought for $80,000 in 2012. The property tax was $830. Not bad, not bad. It continued to go up. Last year it was $2,360. Okay, so Florida is catching up on the property tax. It's not nearly as opportunistic in Florida as it used to be. They still don't have income tax. But those states that don't have income tax do better than we do.
Okay, as I say, time for one or two more, and then we'll move on to the other topics that Senator Erdman has been asked, or Senator Halloran has been asked about.
How will churches be? Will they still be tax exempt?
Churches, profits, tax exempt.
The The only thing a church would be taxed on is if they had something, they would buy a computer or something. But if they bought food for a funeral dinner or a reception, there'd be no consumption tax, because there's no consumption tax on food. The other good news is, everyone is going to pay consumption tax, including the government. Including the government. Because the government doesn't consume anything. I mean, doesn't manufacture or produce anything, it consumes it. And so this sheet that was handed out, Mark Bonkowitz put this together. Mark has been helping us for a long time. These are, a lot of the questions that you may have are on these two sheets. And if you look at the back side of that, I think it's important because there's the distribution model of how the taxes will be collected and distributed. On those last 2 pages talks about the county and the school, how that money will be distributed back. So those are just examples how it follows through to get the money back. But no, nonprofits are going to get a pay. And a lot of nonprofits that I know of in Lincoln, Omaha, surely need to pay something. And so everybody's going to pay, including the county, the city, all those are going to pay consumption tax.
All right, one last question, and then you're welcome to stick around, as they mentioned, after the fact and have that conversation. But question was in regards to the schools, with the 2.5% cap on schools. If there's a bond issue necessary, is there a mechanism in place to make that happen?
There is, we're going to have separate, two funds set up for the growth in schools. We'll have a fund set up for that. And there's also an emergency fund set up if you have a tornado or something that destroys your school or you have an emergency need. So we'll have an opportunity there. You're going to ask the question that's probably you've thought of, will there be a consumption tax in the cities? Because the city currently has a sales tax, right? Okay, a consumption tax can be put in place by local units of government with a vote of the people, similar to what you did with the sales tax. And so you can put a consumption tax in Hastings for a city revenue source, but it has to be voted on by the people.
All right, thank you, Senator Erdman, for the discussion on that. Really appreciate you coming out. Certainly while you're in town, we'd welcome you to stick around and spend some of your money. So there's some great places here in Hastings, and drink the Kool-Aid while you're here.
Yeah. We'll be here as long as it takes to answer questions, and we'll be here to have the petition.
Yes, and the Senator said he'll be here after the fact for continued questions and the petition. So I've handed Senator Halloran a few questions that have already been sent outside of the consumption tax, epic tax. If you have any more, feel free to raise your hand, wave a card, and we'll get those answered as well.
Thanks so much, and multiple thanks to the Area Chamber of Commerce, Hastings Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Adams County and Webster County Farm Bureau. This wouldn't happen, well, it would happen, but it might be in a smaller room. But much appreciated for the hosting of this meeting, and we're going to have another one, I think it's March 18th. So there's been several question cards been handed to me. One was a card dealing with school lunch program, universal meals, 3 bills, well, 2 bills in regard to that, LB 99 and LB 285. And there's a reason that I wear cowboy boots. It's got kind of a high heel, and it's not a height thing. It's because I don't want to be caught flat-footed. And this might be considered to be flat-footed because, as I mentioned earlier, I have not looked at all 800 bills. But Rod has given me the statement of intent for LB 285, and that one is dealing with a request of the state to help supplement free and reduced lunches, a federal program. And so, we'll look at that. I don't have an answer for that, whether I support it or not at this point. I look at the hearing coming up and see what the proponents and opponents say of that, yes.
That was my question. My group, I'm with the Nebraska School Nutrition Association. We are statewide lunch ladies. We were at the Capitol the other day visiting with some senators. You were not on my side of the building. But a couple senators I talked to and aides did not realize our lunch program is not part of the school funding. We are our own business in the school. So the way we make money and buy our groceries is through the kids' lunch bills that we send out. Our school is not as bad as others, but families cannot afford to pay lunch bills. We are 35% low income. And I think one of the bills, Senator Walls said it should be like 62% for your school. So We have so many families that are just above that level that cannot pay. So it's a struggle for me as a lunch lady because our rules and regulations are changing all the time. And I just want to feed our kids, and it's very, very hard to do that. And with supply chain issues, harder yet. But we all hang in there. But any help we can get with helping with the lunch program, like I said, I just want to make sure you're aware that we are not funded through the school unless we have no money, we can't make our ends meet in the school with subsidized. We are our own entity in the school, just our own little business there. But I just want to throw out there that any help, when we had the 2 years of COVID, was great for our kids, amazing for our kids. It's the only lunch some of them get, only good meal they get a day during the day. So I just want
I can
to
appreciate
share my
that.
feelings.
Is there anyone here that reflects back on their school days and didn't love the lunch ladies? Okay, let us look at that. I think you probably have a lot of sympathy and empathy for that bill. The other one on the card was a question about LB 267. Senator Brewer had a bill that the following constitutes the reasons for the bill. The intent of this bill is to provide for the prioritization of resources for the protection of critical infrastructure utility workers during any civil defense emergency. One would think that that was in place now, but it isn't necessarily so. And the argument for this bill, as I understand it, and briefly understand it, is that the civil defense workers or utility workers need to have prioritization, whatever prioritization is necessary for them to perform their duties to get what? To get electricity back to the site of the disaster. Makes common sense, but that prioritization is not necessarily always there, and this would expedite that and make it required to happen. Nothing gets fixed when you have a natural disaster when you don't have electricity. Another card that was sent in, and this one's going to be a tough one. What is your position on proposed gun legislation? I don't know if any of you here, it's a mystery to any of you, what my sentiment is in regard to the Second Amendment. Let me try to resolve any anxieties that you might have. This probably question is probably directed at Colonel Brewer, Senator Brewer's bill on constitutional carry. My guess is what this is focused on. That hearing took place yesterday, and there were over 100 people in the hall. And I had never, actually, they were lined up outside my office on the way to the judiciary hearing room. And as I made my way back from the floor to my office, I had to go through these folks waiting to go to the hearing. And I told them, I said, I've never felt safer. And one of them, at the end of the hall, this was not one that was a witness to going to testify at the hearing. One individual at the end of the hall says, "Wow." I said, "I never felt safer." And he said, "Yeah, there are a lot of police and state patrol here." And I said, "That's not what I mean. These folks are here and they're responsible, reliable gun owners, and they're my least concern. And maybe a few of them are packing, and if anybody does anything stupid, we're all going to be protected, the fact that they're there." Constitutional carry is a proposal to allow people to conceal carry without going through the permit process. Now, that may cause a lot of consternation. I'm not worried about people that conceal carry that are law-abiding citizens. It's those that will choose to carry and use a gun who have no intentions of getting a permit, even though they're required to get a permit now, right? Those people are going to do whatever they do with a stolen gun or an illegally purchased gun. The law doesn't have much hold over criminals. They're criminals because what? They don't obey the law. So we can make all the laws in the world to try to govern and restrict gun use, but the criminals don't care. They're going to continue to abuse those laws. So I'm all for constitutional carry. It's the obligation of anyone that does that to take training to be a good citizen.
What are your thoughts on the governor's proposal to increase funding for education?
Well, we've got a pile of money. we've got a pile of money, and Senator Erdman can speak to this better than I can. He's on Appropriations Committee. But we do have a significant reserve, and in anticipated growth, we're going to have even more money. And so my concern with that is that a lot of that carryover reserve that we have now is a result of federal funding, federal programs, one-time programs. And so if we eat away at that dramatically for budget proposals, those will be budget proposals in the future. When that money runs out, whatever we use that money for now in appropriations will be a line item in the future. So that's what I look at when I judge these issues of how we're going to spend that money, because it's not necessarily going to be there in the future, right?
All right, you and Senator Erdman have both co-sponsored, LB 753. Could you please explain to everyone what that bill is and why I would be unable to donate to a public school foundation and receive a tax credit? Why is it specific to private schools only?
753. That is the Scholarship Opportunity Act. That's a bill that Senator Linehan has been proposing for a number of years, and it's an act that would create a scholarship program that would allow people, I think the governor's put a budget in for the biennium of $50 million. That would be a program that would allow individuals to contribute to the scholarship fund. Any student would be eligible to apply for it if that student and their parents feel that their fit in whatever school they're in isn't working for them. And it'd be a scholarship that will allow them to choose to go to another school. We have some great public schools, but the fact of the matter is one shoe size does not fit all, right? There are kids, particularly in North Omaha, but there are kids all across the state, in some instances, that they're in a school that just doesn't fit for them. But there may be an optional school for them to go to, but that optional school is expensive. There's a tuition to a private school, for lack of a better description. There's a tuition that would be necessary to go to that school. This scholarship program would allow children and families to apply for that and be able to use that scholarship money to pay for tuition to go to a private school. Yeah, I'm supporting that.
Any other questions? I don't have any more cards. One more for that, right?
That was my question. You didn't answer the second part of the question, though. If my wife and I, under this current bill, as I understand it, chose to donate $5,000 of our income to Hastings St. Cecilia to support a scholarship program at Hastings St. Cecilia, we could receive, dollar for dollar, a $5,000 tax credit under the current bill as it's written, a $5,000 tax credit back to us, which then that money is obviously decreasing my taxable income, and that money is not going into the state general fund that then supports public education. So what it seems like is, and you can do this up to 50% of a person's income and corporation's income, so it's incentivizing people that have the means to donate to private schools to then get a tax credit back that then decreases the money to the general fund for public education. So the second part of my question was, why can't my wife and I donate $5,000 to Hastings Public Schools Foundation and receive the same tax credit that somebody would receive if they donated to a private school?
That's a good question, and I will ask Senator Linehan that question, okay? I don't have an answer for that. It may not be a bad idea. But I don't, people get really upset. Some people get upset that, oh my gosh, this is $25 million a year that might not be taxed, that people may be able to get a tax credit on, right? And that loss of $25 million in the total scope of the budget for what is appropriated for schools is going to undermine the public school system. I'm sorry. You know, I get a, you know, if I get a hangnail, I don't go to the paramedics and say I'm dying. That's not gonna kill me. This isn't gonna kill public schools. But it does give kids and families where they don't fit a school. Now, is that gonna be used around here a lot? No, probably not. But North Omaha, if we're really empathetic people, the schools in North Omaha, Senator Justin Wayne's community, those schools, their performance rate for functionally literate, for reading and math skills is about half or less what our schools here are here now. They're graduating kids, pumping them out, functionally illiterate. And they're stuck in that school because they're in a zip code. They're in a zip code that requires them to go to that school. They are stuck, and they're poor people, and they don't have any money. I've got empathy for people like that, okay? I've got empathy for people like that. They need to have the opportunity to have a better school, to choose a different school. And that's what this program would do. So the sky's not gonna fall. The public schools aren't gonna be lacking sufficient income to make what they do work and work well. So I'm supportive of it because those kids need an option.
Any final?
This on something. Does that include all these people that Biden's bringing in? And Hastings has a lot of them? Where are they going? Who's gonna educate them?
The question is, who's going to educate the refugees that are coming into the state?
Right.
Well, they would be subject to the same option on that program that anyone else would be, right? Now, the bulk of them may end up in public schools, and that might be a perfect fit for them. I think it'd be a great fit for most of the kids. It's those few kids that find themselves in a school that just does not work for them. And if you want to see an example of that, North Omaha, again, is a great example of that.
We're just gonna have an overabundance of kids that have no place to go.
Right. No, I don't disagree. Her comment was that we're going to have a lot of, we're going to be not stuck with, but we're going to have a lot of people, abundant number of people with no place to go. I agree with that. But part of that's a policy of way beyond the state level. That's at the federal level. That's putting upon us and a lot of communities across the country that same kind of circumstance, and it's not right.
I know. Senator, there's been a lot of discussion on the so-called heartbeat bill, and a lot of opposition from one senator in particular with all the parliamentary procedure items that she's bringing forward. What is the progress of that bill, and what's your feelings on it?
The heartbeat bill is a bill brought by Senator Joni Albright. There's been what time we've had in the mornings on the floor have been debating where that bill, it's a pro-life bill, right? If there's a heartbeat, there's a life. And let me just say it, this isn't rocket science. If a paramedic goes to an accident site, let's say a car accident, severe car accident, someone's traumatically injured, what's the first thing they check? The heartbeat, right? Is there a life there? And if the heartbeat is low, they try to do what they can do to sustain that and help the individual. The heartbeat is a simple measurement of whether or not there's a life involved. And that's what this bill revolves around and strikes a benchmark of where an abortion can take place or not. So if there's a heartbeat, there'd be no abortion. There's exceptions for incest and rape. But anyway, the controversy on the floor has been where that bill has been referenced to, what committee it's been referenced to. It's been referenced to Health and Human Services, and of course some of my liberal friends on the floor would prefer that have gone to Judiciary. Now, why would they like that? Of course, they say, well, typically, historically, that's where many abortion bills, not all, but many abortion bills go, is Judiciary. Over the last decade or so, we've heard arguments that it's all, the abortion issues is much about the health of the mother. Well, it's a natural thing to me to suggest that, or to say that, it should be directed to Health and Human Services. Those that are arguing against it going to Health and Human Services want to go to Judiciary because it's a 4-4 split on that committee. Okay, 4-4 split. And that would tie it up in the committee and it would never advance to the floor. We would have the option to pull it to the floor. They know that. That's a challenge, that's a job, and it's a massive floor debate to get enough votes to pull it to the floor, but it could happen. So they don't want it to go to Health and Human Services because they don't have as many votes there on that to advance.
Any final questions? Okay, we'll do one more, and then I know both senators will be here to continue with questions. Yeah. Put those two together.
Okay, is there a bill to fix the public school? We keep talking about, kids don't fit in the public school, so why not fix it? If it was a private business, people don't shop at a private business that doesn't work, so the public school should be the same way. Or reduce the amount of money that public schools get. And the second question or statement, I've heard of the money follows the child. So if parents are homeschooling because their kids don't fit in public school, why can't the homeschool parents keep that tax money that they pay to the school district?
We're gonna mention it again. Deciding commission.
Would you be interested in running for the legislature? No, very good questions. Why not fix the public schools? You know, I'm not going to place myself in a position of saying what needs to be fixed or not fixed. What I'm saying is that when, to your point, when you have options to go to another school, or the money follows the child, say the property taxes follow the child, when you have that option, and some states do this, Iowa just passed a fairly massive bill on school choice, $300 million. When you have that opportunity in the state to do that, what happens is competition. Competition fixes everything. Florida has done this for years, school choice. And the sky was going to fall when they proposed it. It was just going to be the end of the world. Teachers union came out and threatened to castrate any legislator that voted for it, but they passed it anyway. And so what's happened over time in Florida? Well, the public school performance went up. They lost a few kids because people optioned out of it or chose the money to follow the child to another school, private school. But the public schools and their performance just went up exponentially. Well, why did that happen? Well, they had competition, and they, at the risk of not wanting to lose more students, they really got together and said, okay, we need to compete better, right? So don't look to the legislature to help you fix anything, okay? I'm just saying, that's not what we have a history of doing well. But giving opportunities is what the legislature can do, passing legislature. In longer term, this opportunity scholarship bill is nothing, dollar-wise, compared to something that needs to be done in the future, and that is the money follows the child. Homeschool as well. Closing remarks. Well, we got that gentleman in the back. I recognize. I think his name is Willis Hunt. Okay, I'm going to have to drag the mic a little bit.
Well, one thing we have to remember about our taxes, we in Nebraska have in our school system local control. And local control means that you as a citizen must get involved in that and not keep asking our legislature to fix something, because it's not their responsibility to fix something. They have helped with our local schools and the aid to local schools they've given it in Hastings public schools, that's a substantial amount, for which I'm very grateful. But on the other side, we keep forgetting that we want somebody else to fix it. But I can tell you, my friends, we must fix it. We must get involved. We must do it. And quit sitting down and beginning to stand up.
Amen. Can we have an hallelujah? All right. Well, our time is coming close to an end, unless there's more questions. As Senator Urban had mentioned before, and as has been mentioned, we will very gladly stick around after the official 10:30 is passed here and visit with you personally about issues that you have on your minds. But Steve, you have a passing comment?
Just one last thing, I didn't spend a lot of time on this pamphlet you received. Please take a look at that. It's very significant. And the other issue that I would bring to your attention, we would encourage you to sign the petition, even if you are not totally 100% sure that the EPIC option is the right one. Signing the petition only means that you give the voters a chance to consider it. So I would encourage you to sign the petition. The young people will be over here, Yellowstone will be here to get your signature and to answer questions. And if you'd like to volunteer to be a petition circulator, they can also help you with that. So if you would, I would encourage you to sign the petition. And as Senator Holler mentioned, I really appreciate you being here. This is a tremendous turnout on a Saturday morning in Hastings. And it was worth my drive over here, and I hope you feel the same way when you leave, that it was worth your time. Thank you.
And thanks again, Hastings Area Chamber of Commerce, and thank them and yourselves, if you will, in the Adams County, the Webster County Farm Bureau.
Yes, I would echo the sentiment. Thank you to Senator Halloran and to Senator Urban for taking the time this morning. More importantly, thank you to all of you. It's the opportunity for you to visit with our elected officials and share your thoughts and concerns. So Senator Halloran will also tell you, I used to work in the legislature some, and I can't tell you the number of times that bills would be up and we'd get those phone calls of, I haven't heard from anybody on this. So you do not have to wait until the next talk with the senator to let Senator Halloran know what you think or feel. Call his office, email him, send him a text message. They'll be happy to hear from you. So thank you.